All right, everyone. We are back with another one of our, normally I'd say animator interview, but maybe artist interview. Today we have Paul, I'm going to say this probably wrong, Kageji,
Hard G's, man.
Kageji,
Caggegi.
Kageji. I was not even close.
Got it.
Um, so, uh, what don't and you would you consider yourself what, an illustrator, artist, 3D guy, generalist, art,
Ooh,
man of the world?
let's go with Man of the World, International
There you
Man of
go.
Mystery.
Yeah, there you go.
Um, look, I've touched on a lot of things. I would say generalist, just purely because most of my work has been in education fields on how to teach people how to use software.
Sure.
My work has touched on animation, specifically in the 3D space, which is interesting because the work that I've done for the last 4 years for CG Cookie has been, funnily enough, about illustration or
Mhm.
using the grease pencil tool in Blender, which is a 3D program. So it's sort of using the environment of a 3D program to produce 2D work.
Well,
But what I
I mean,
find,
that's been around forever with like tune shaders going back to like, you know,
yes.
I think it was like was it Ghost in the Shell 2 or Ghost in the Shell 1? I remember Toon Shaders. I even made a joke once because I think in Ghost in the Shell 1 there were 3D bullets, or it was either 3D bullets or there was a 3D gun with a Toon Shader, but it had
Mhm.
2D. And I said I want my indie band name to be called 3D Bullets for My 2D Gun or something along those lines. Or a song title. I just feel like it's a good song title. 3D Bullets
Yeah,
for
is
My
that a
2D
song title or band name? I mean, yeah, look, everyone's got a list
Gun.
of band names, yeah, and that'll be in the top 10, I'm sure.
But I mean, that whole concept of like using 3D to make 2D is definitely something that's been around for a little bit.
It
Um,
has. What's interesting with Grease Pencil is it's sort of like reintroducing 2D elements into a 3D space. So we're talking frame by frame animation. We're talking, you know, literal 2D planes
mhm.
of work, but they're situated or integrated into a 3D environment. And so it's all contingent on the camera angle. So yes, what you're describing, toon shading, is say you want to do a smoke or particle effect, or have. I think I was watching an episode of Invincible recently, and they do it really, really well. So you've got 2D animation, but then you've got like a 3D truck that gets blown
Oh,
up and is
every
rolling.
any animation you've ever seen in the last 20 years, if there's a car, that car is 3D.
Yeah,
I have
exactly.
not seen a non 3D car in God knows how long. Like I just like 3D. Okay, I get it. It's much easier to animate that than it is to
Yeah,
animate like all the
but
wheels moving. But it's like,
But then you want to put some smoke effects in there,
right,
and instead of doing like a particle effect, which they look really bad,
right.
toon shaded particles, but you can then hand animate that because you're frame by frame. And so you add 2D smoke on top of a 3D toon shaded car composited onto a two, and then you like it's a whole mind bending thing. So Grease Pencil is almost like, well, why don't we just put the 2D elements directly in that 3D space? Suddenly you can
Right,
track it in 3D space. So
right,
wherever it has to be, or it can face cameras, you
right,
can do things that sort of integrate it. And so it becomes this tool that is, yes, 2D animation, but with the view of being in a 3D environment for the
right.
purposes of 3D or 2D animation that's
Sure.
using 3D. Am I?
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, like this has been around. I mean, After Effects has had we call it 2.5D.
Yeah.
It's been around. I mean, even games like Doom going back to the 90s were really like 2.5D, where it's like, you're moving around a 3D space, but everything you see is really a two-dimensional plane that's always facing towards the virtual camera.
Yeah.
So yeah, but let's move back a little bit because I feel like we're jumping the gun a little
Yeah,
bit. So
yeah,
you
sure.
have a background as an actual illustrator, correct? Or
Yeah. Like I've been illustrating for most of my life. It's I picked it up as a kid, did a lot of drawing, and I will do. It ranges. It ranges from I I'm very passionate about life drawing. I'll go to a lot
Sure.
of life drawing classes. It's just sort of how I keep in practice. Just sort of not only learning about anatomy and things like that, but also motion. And you're in a 3D space, literally. You know, you're in the real
Right.
world. And so I think I was talking to some other artists in a life drawing class, as well as the model afterwards. And the model was saying, "Oh, what do you prefer to draw?" And I said, "Look, honestly, what the challenge is in a space like this is that everyone in the room is sitting somewhere else. And so they're looking at you from different angles. So everyone's going to have a take on this.
Different
Not
perspective.
everyone is taking the same reference.
Right.
And so every pose is a challenge, whether they're facing away from you, in front of you, to
Right.
the side, however it's lit. And so that's why I do that to keep in practice. In terms of illustration, I've been illustrating. I've done storyboard work in the past for a lot of TV commercials.
Sure.
And most recently, CG Cookie wanted to do a short film, which is still in production, I guess. I
Okay.
think it's been shelved, but like it's somewhere
Oh,
out there. And I did boards for like 3 acts, and it
cool.
was immense. And it was one of the first real tests of okay, can we use Blender's grease pencil to do this? Can we do it in Blender in which it's going to be
Oh, the
animated?
whole animation was done with
It was going to be, yeah.
okay.
And so I really sold them on using grease pencil for the storyboards because you can basically go from storyboard animatic to blocking and then replacing assets in the 3D environment. I thought, well, that's a really cool idea. Why don't we try to create or work to that pipeline?
Mhm.
And so that led to my education job with them. They said, well, you seem to
Okay.
know what you're doing.
Oh, so you got hired as okay, so only you got hired to be their storyboard artist, and then you use grease pencil, and they went, "Oh, you're really good at this. Can you make some courses or
Yeah,
whatever?" Got it.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the timeline for them. And so the courses ranged from, and I had this really big pie in the sky idea that I do like a free basics course and then a lot of paid courses that plug into that. But of course, your students use Blender, you've told me. It's constantly updating.
Sure.
And Grease Pencil is one of those things where the tools are getting better, but no sooner as I've put a course out that's taken me 3 months to produce, that they've just gone, oh, you know what? We've just changed how everything works. It's better,
Right.
but all those tools that you've just taught are obsolete. And I'm just like,
I,
yeah,
I've had that happen while I'm teaching, where I like, like maybe the year before I set up some exercise to do, X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, oh, that button doesn't exist anymore, apparently. And I have to like stop, open up Google, like, Google, where is this button now? Okay, now it's under here. Sorry about that. Like, so yeah, I've had that happen where it's like, something's around and then they move it or they
yeah.
change it. Something happened like between 3 and 4 in Blender. I can't remember what it was, but I was like, something was like, oh, we don't. I forgot what it was where they didn't do it anymore. I think it was like a lighting thing, and it's like they completely
Oh, it was the
changed it.
renderer.
Was
They
that
had their internal renderer, they had cycles, and then
right?
they introduced Eevee, and Eevee was going to take the place of the internal renderer. And everyone's like, well, but we like the the internal renderer is super fast, and it lets us do all of this really fast stuff right there in the interface. And they're going, well, we're going to scrap that. Eevee's going to do that now. Um, and yeah, look, there was a lot of grumbling because all of the courses had been geared towards that OpenGL renderer,
Right.
and now they're introducing Eevee as the fast renderer, and like they had to do it at some point.
Sure.
And I'm glad Eevee's here because it's almost like a game engine renderer, which makes a lot more sense in the fact that you're able to uh, well look, to basically in any 3D program when you're looking at your screen and you're working, you're seeing a render, and
Right.
the simpler it is, the more real time you're seeing it. And depending on the computing power that you have at your disposal, you could either render in wireframe, and you have to sort of imagine what all the effects are going to look like
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the end when you hit the render button. But then there are varying levels of that. And where Eevee came in was they said, oh, well, we want our internal renderer to be as close to the finished product as possible
Sure.
without sacrificing that real time interaction.
Right.
So you could see lighting and shading and
Yeah.
textures and
Basic
all that sort
basic.
of stuff as you're building models, as you're animating stuff. You want a basic effect in there, it goes in. And that made a lot more sense because cycles, you need a lot of processing power. You need a good
Yeah.
graphics card. You need a lot of CPU if you're going to render with that. And so you know that in general, with 3D up until now, you've had to hit that big render button at the end of the process, and then the computer goes away and thinks about it for days and days and days, and
Right.
then you look at it and just go, ah, I forgot that setting, and now,
Right.
you know, Shrek?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Donkey's hair. There's this famous outtake where they spent like a week rendering a scene, and they forgot to press like one parameter, and Donkey's hair just like exploded, and so Donkey's walking around like this
I
massive
haven't seen
fluff
that one, but
ball,
yeah,
and
I've
they're
been there.
like, yeah, we forgot to carry the one or something like that in
Yeah, yeah, of
there.
course.
But
Well,
now,
I always tell my
you
students
can do that.
with every Pixar movie, the last year of it is literally just rendering it out. Like it's not
Yes.
even like they're just
Yeah.
purely rendering all day long. Like
Yeah,
5 days.
exactly. And so, yeah, that's why they introduced it, and that was the big change that you're talking about. It was the internal render engine, and they went, well, in order to have this, we've got to sacrifice the other thing, and so they kicked out the internal render engine, and basically Eevee takes its place now.
Okay. So, why don't you tell my students, so, you were an illustrator, I'm assuming with charcoal, or were you using sort of a digital program?
I
Yeah.
jumped onto digital very very early on, but
Okay.
I'm more of a pen. Yeah, I do like
Are
my
you using
pencil
like
and
a
paper.
Wacom tablet or something like along those lines?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. In fact, I've done a little bit of promotional work for Wacom in the
Oh, nice.
past, and so currently I'm working on two things. One that I can show you. It's a little. These are really cool. That is a Intuos Pro,
Uh-huh. Oh,
and
very
that's
cool.
just you know one of these things that you just draw on,
Oh, nice.
and they are affordable. Look for sales on them. And I don't want to sound like a shill for Wacom, but I'm going to sound like a shill for Wacom.
Sure.
There's a reason why they're a preferred brand for a lot of
Right.
artists, and that is that they are a solid product. There are some very good competitive brands that do the same thing, Huon, XP Pen, and they do put out a good range of solid products. Wacom is going to be the product that is going to be with you for life. And so you think about it in terms of a long term investment. So if you're going to spend $100 on something, but something comes out that's $50, yes, the $50 thing could work, but you may only have that for maybe a year or two
Right.
years. The $100 thing is going to be with you for 5 or 6 years. And so when
Sure.
you break down that way, you've actually spent less per
Right.
year. Wacom is that,
Yeah,
right? They
sure.
often talk
No.
about it as the Rolls Royce. Anyway, sorry. I'll stop shilling for Wacom now.
No, no, I
Yes, I
totally
work
get it
on
with
it.
like, yeah, it's a little more, but it's more, we would, back in the day with cars, you would call it sturdy. Like, it
Yeah,
costs a lot, but it's sturdier, so therefore it's less likely to break down,
yeah, but
as
they
something.
have an affordable range that is competitive. Like they have looked at the market and they've seriously seen that there is good competitive products, and they're just gone, well,
Sure.
hang on a minute, we can't market ourselves as the Rolls Royce. We have
Right.
to market ourselves as the sturdy brand. So yeah, the other thing I work on is a Cintiq, which is
Sure.
really good, and they're one of those displays that
Yeah,
you
yeah.
draw directly on. And so
We have a
that's
couple of them that my students can use if they would like.
yeah.
They're nice.
It's good that you bring that up because when we're talking about Blender, there's something that's happening with Blender
Okay.
down the track is that it's going to be another big change.
Okay.
Blender up until now, and your students will probably know this for sure, it's very heavy on the shortcut keys, on the
Right.
hotkeys,
Yes.
right? There's a lot of Control Shift Alt A keyboard mashing,
Yes.
whereas there's a lot more art being done, and this is 2D illustration as well as 3D animation, that's being done on touch screens. So people are drawing on their iPads in what's the big program there? Procreate,
Sure. Yeah.
right? Or Wacom has got a product called the Movink, or you get touch screens, and you want to do a lot of the little pinch zoom functions, the sort of little gestural swipes and stuff like that. And Blender hasn't had that for a while, right?
Right. So now they're trying to make it a little
And
more
so now we've got
touchscreen.
some programmers there at the Blender Foundation just going, you know what, we need to introduce some touch controls for Blender.
Oh,
So we
cool.
don't know what version it's going to be in. There are some experimental branches of Blender you could probably find that is playing
Right.
around with this. But what this means is that companies like Wacom and companies that are doing touch displays want to work more closely with programs like Blender,
Oh, nice.
knowing that it's going to be more useful in future for working
Sure.
with this sort of technology.
Oh, awesome. That is really cool. Scoop, scoop, scoop. So you did mention, so let's talk a little bit, what kind of brought you from, illustrating, whether digital or you know, charcoal back in the day. What brought you that to say Blender or doing or any 3D program for that matter? What kind of gave you that? What made you want to leap, would you say?
Oh, leave.
Leap, like or
Oh, leap.
make the
Right.
leap, make the not sorry, not leap, but you know what I mean, make the jump from
Oh,
like
right.
2D to 3D or
Well, first off, money, job.
sure.
Let's see. I was working. Oh, look, here's my backstory. My yeah, what do they call it? My supervillain origin story.
Or just start.
Yeah, I was working in a boutique production studio doing a lot of TV commercials.
Okay.
So getting paid to do that. And 3D was sort of up and coming, more and more
Sure.
programs. I think we mentioned before Maya
Maya,
was being
pretty
used a
nice.
lot in
Yeah.
the television industry. And even though there was a lot of drawing and illustration for storyboards and whatnot, so I was still doing all of that, I was looking for a way of learning and being on top of that. It was what my stingy bosses would call on the job training, which is basically, well, we don't want to send you to school. We
Right.
don't want
Yeah.
to. So here's some software. Can you learn it so that we can introduce it into our work? And that's what kind of got me onto Blender.
Okay.
We're talking a good couple of decades ago. I want to say 20 something years ago, when it was still in the early days. And so I kind of have been in the Blender community, in the Blender space for a good long time.
Nice.
Yeah, it was basically to see how production was evolving
Mhm.
and then sort of having to keep up with that. But everything was about, okay, well, how can we do it as cost effectively as possible,
Sure.
right? That's the reality of it.
Sure.
But
Okay, so
then
you took so
so
it being free was definitely like a part of
it
your
was a
job wanted you
bonus.
to 3D. You're like, here's a possible 3D, free option or low cost option, and you're like, that totally makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we all know what the alternative was, and
Yeah.
here's another inside scoop. A lot of the studios were okay with it. They're like, well, we don't want to fork out thousands of dollars for this program. Can you just acquire it in some other
Right.
way? So commercial
Yeah.
studios were doing that.
I bet they were.
Yeah, well, especially smaller ones. So I was like, I got ethics, and
Yeah.
that will always make you less money. But so I was like, well, I want to find out that there's a capable program and that I can introduce some of this sort of stuff. And so that's what sort of got me onto Blender. And then, the community at large is worldwide and it's
Sure.
huge. And so it was fast forward to 2018, just before COVID hit and the world sort of changed and we had the Marvel blip.
Sure.
I was at a conference and this thing called Grease Pencil had come onto the scene. I was like,
Okay.
oh, I can bring back my love of drawing in an application that I've had to use for work.
Mhm.
And so I started dabbling in that as well. So to answer your question, the leap was because job
job. Sure.
and things were evolving. If you were going to continue to be an employable asset, you sort of needed to be on top of certain things.
Sure.
And of course, even Blender back then, a lot of the skills that you learn in 3D are transferable to other 3D applications.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Right.
I learned on Maya because Blender, when I was learning, did not exist, or at least I think actually it's been around, but I think at that point it was still commercial. It wasn't, it hadn't gone, it had the company that owned it from Germany or whatever was hadn't gone bankrupt, so they didn't like open source it yet. So, but like when I learned, I've learned 3D Max and Cinema 4D because for a while, if you wanted to do motion graphics, you had to know Cinema 4D. But like, in the same way, drawing skills are transferable from physical to digital,
Yeah.
or, color theories, the same skills. I always tell my students, like, if you want to learn Maya later on, don't, go ahead and do it. But it's like they have it's the same thing, vertices, polygons,
Yeah.
materials. Like, yes, the button is different, or it's, they may call it something slightly different, but the
Yeah.
concept of like, here is a 3D model built out of polygons or NURBs if you're going that direction. You can usually apply a material, you can render it somehow. Most programs have a way to UV map it in some way, shape, or form. Like
Yeah.
most programs have a way to animate it in some way, shape, or
Yeah,
form.
well,
So
yeah,
it's
and
like
you
rig
you
it,
brought it back to illustration, which is
yeah,
a really good point. And the reason why I still do pencil on paper illustration and life drawing classes or just like observational or reference drawing is because those skills are transferable to a digital environment.
sure,
You still need to know good anatomical or environmental references. You need to know how to look at the world and observe the world in a certain way
right,
before you make the image, whatever your tool is. And so, yes, transferable skills is a really important point, especially when it comes to the education side of things. So, illustrating, like, I'm I'm really like blown away at how much pencil and paper work I actually still do
oh great,
before I even jump into digital. But then, digital programs were born out of, okay, how do we take the process that everybody knows and put
right,
it in this environment? I mean, the early Photoshop applications
sure,
were this. They were basically taking the dark room
right.
and saying, okay, what tools do we find in the dark room and what do we put on the screen? And that's why we still have, burn and dodge,
Run
and
and
why we
dodge,
have
yeah,
masking and the pen tool and all and all those tools are
yeah,
like, okay, well, what tools did we use?
right, right.
And then even layering came out
Well, it's
of
it's
the
funny
dark
how
room.
like icons become almost in separated from their original. Like I teach students and you are literally 20, right? Or even
Yeah,
younger. And it's like every icon for save is what? A floppy disk from 1995, which I grew up with, but like my students never. Floppy disks were obsolete by the time I got to college. So it's like there's no way they ever saw one, maybe, So I'll even ask my students, I'm like, do you guys know what this is? Like they know it means save, but they like, do you know what actual physical thing it is? Like, I'm like, yeah, okay. So it's like it's interesting that like icons can become, even though I mean, I guess some people still do darkroom, but like, I learned in traditional darkroom, but of course
yeah,
everything's digital now, so it's like you're not literally using you know, you're not using the enlarger to, put light on your photograph like you were in, night this is like 2000 for me. So it's like, but you know why it's a little like the Dodge is like that little thing with
yeah.
paper on it, right? Because you would take a little piece of and you would do this to block the
It's
light.
it's
And it's like,
literally a
yeah.
piece of cardboard on a pair
Yeah,
of
yeah.
tongs that you're
Yeah,
holding over the thing.
I used to
Yeah,
make mine out of like a paper clip and some paper. You would just cut out a
yeah,
circle, put it on a paper clip, and then do this
yeah,
over the light, and that's to make it lighter,
yeah.
And of course now you can do that all with, I mean, now you can do it with AI, but for a while you're doing it with Photoshop, you know, and it's like, but it's funny that like that's the icon, and I guarantee you my students have no idea what that means because
But
why
then
would
you'll
they?
see it propagate down into programs like Inkscape or Critter
Right, right.
because that's a system that works. That's an icon that is known. have you, as an aside to the save icon, you've probably seen the meme, but like, I'm not sure if you've physically done this. Have you brought a floppy disk into the classroom and
I have a floppy disk. The
have
IT
someone say,
department
"Oh
was
wow,
throwing some old. I actually, what's funny is I did this as a joke, kind of. I applied for a job once, and I wrote my name on a floppy disk, like an old school 3.5. And I basically put a QR code on it so they could actually get to my real website. Because of course, like, how are you supposed to run a floppy disk in 2000? I don't think you could. Like, I don't even, I'm a tech geek and I couldn't even tell you where you would be able to find a computer that could even do that. Like, you'd have to
oh,
like go to some super high, someone who like stores every computer ever made kind of guy to like find it. And it's, but I did give someone a floppy disk that as a kind of like a joke, like, look, I'm a computer dork, because
yeah."
it was a programming job. So I just, or as a teacher, so I kind of was like showing, it's kind of tongue in cheek, like a kind of a joke. But yeah, it was an old floppy disk with like, 3.5 floppy disk. But yeah, no one knows what those are.
Yeah,
I,
the meme was like, "Oh look, my teacher 3D printed the save icon."
oh yeah, there you go. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah. So we were talking about illustration
Yeah,
transferable
your
skills.
transition. So what makes you enjoy Blender so much?
Oh, well, this is going to sound really, motivational poster speak. The community
Hmm.
is amazing.
Sure.
It's been the way since the early days of Blender, in that whether it was on an IRCC channel or
Hmm.
ICQ or social media or whatever we use to communicate, and because it was open source and because people developing Blender were using Python,
Sure.
they were all over these forums as well. Blender became sort of like the de facto open source software
Oh
where
yeah.
if you had a problem with it, you could jump onto almost any of these kind of chats or forums or groups, ask a question, and there'd be a programmer who'd say, "Well, have you tried this?"
Right, right.
Right? And so the community is then some of those programmers who were on those group chats and everything like that end up being employed or
Right.
or doing stuff that's actually going into the main branch of Blender.
Right.
And so the community kind of fed the development side of Blender in a huge way. So
Hmm.
there's this real kind of I don't know if it's a cycle thing, but like the community are also programmers, the
Right, right.
programmers are also the developers are also the community. It's not like from a top down. If you had to sort of think about it as like a company, the people who run or make Blender, and then everyone who uses it. The
Well, it's
way of
definitely
getting in,
any sort of open, I mean, as someone who's worked in open, not worked, but like, uses open source and been around open
yeah,
source communities, you're always going to get it's open source communities are always kind of like DIY. I want this thing, and then someone else is doing it. And it's kind of the love of the game. No
yeah,
one owns it. So everyone just kind of shares stuff. And it's like, oh, here's a plugin I made, or,
yeah.
like I mean, that's
Oh
Blender,
look,
I think, is one of the biggest ones, but like
it is,
you
but
find
like it
this,
really took it to another level.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so like I would say that that is one of the strongest thing. Okay, why do I like it specifically? Disregard the early days of Blender, and we are talking 20 years ago, so no one's going to care. But I found that the interface has grown to become something that's much more intuitive, much more
Yes.
about okay, what do you want to do with this program? We will build a tool for it. You know,
Right.
what is your preferred way of working? Oh, okay, we're going to make that a default. You know,
Right.
case in point, left click select was a huge point of contention
Okay.
because I'll explain why. This is just a really good example of a tool that okay, so everything else, Photoshop, After Effects, 3D Max, all the other things, you select with a left click.
Right.
Blender was renowned for right click select. Okay. And so when they went, well, we kind of want to integrate it with a more like,
Yeah.
professional, more, what other programs are doing. So we're going to turn the default into left click. And you can still change it back, but there was like these die-hard right click selects, you know,
Right.
holdouts. And there's even, I think there's a forum group called Right Click Select, just as a bit of a joke to that.
Right.
Um, but they were like, you know what, we want to be. It's not that they want to be taken seriously exactly, but like they would say, look, more and more people are coming to Blender, and their biggest hurdle is, well, we have to learn all of these new shortcuts. We need to learn how to use this application before we can make anything. And so they just thought, well, why don't we just make it easier for the
Right.
person coming to Blender to transfer skills or learn it in a way that is going to have transferable skills. So left click select is my go-to tool. That is a really good example of where Blender sort of came up to the fore and just went, okay, we hear you. And
Right.
so now I find that trickles down to drawing tools.
Sure.
Even stuff as esoteric as the grease pencil is. I'm finding the drawing tools are much more intuitive, much more useful. They're changing some systems under the hood, like how a brush asset is being treated by the program, where a
Sure.
material lives, how you save and export brushes, all that sort of stuff. That stuff is really important to me because all I want to do is sit down, open up a sketchbook or a program, and just start to draw. And I
Right.
don't really want to think about, oh, I've got to set up this setting and I've got to think about this shortcut and I've got to do blah, blah, blah. And so ultimately, the easier it is to use something, the more you can think about what you want to create
Sure.
and not how it's going to be created.
Well, okay. I love the open source community, so I don't want to seem like I'm bad mouthing it, but a lot of the open source community is programmer heavy, right? They're written
Yes.
by programmers. And as someone who's an artist, like I can program, but I'm not a great programmer. The way that programmers think about things and the way that like artists think about things is very different. My understand because it's and I kind of learned how programmers think about things, which is programmers go, we need every button all of the time. Whereas for a lot of artists, they go, oh my God, there's like a million buttons and they get overwhelmed. And like I had this conversation with Inkscape where I was like, I know you think you want every button available, but my people, the artists, they don't want that. They
Yeah.
want like the five buttons that they use the most. And then, if there's another, maybe every so often there's another tool, it can be a subset. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So it's a different culture, it's a different mindset, it's a different way of thinking from a user experience
Yeah.
perspective. And like I said, because a lot of the people involved in open source tend to be more on the programming side of things and less on the creative or
Yeah.
side of things, that I think sometimes like that's why I kind of call myself like I'm the in between. Like I live in both worlds.
Yes.
I understand what artists really want who have no interest in programming nothing and aren't maybe necessarily the most technical people. But
Hmm.
I also I know I get what the programmers are thinking and their mindset, but I'm also like, but that's what you want. You have to
Yes.
understand that like not everyone using this is of that mindset. And some people are more like my
Yeah.
people who are like, I just want something simple. I want five buttons that I can do 90% of the work with. And that's,
Yeah, yeah, or that you're going to be using a lot. And look, I'm much like you. I find education really bridges that gap as well.
sure.
Educating means that, and this is something that this is why courses take a long time. Yeah, you can have a lot of YouTubers, like you can have 100 YouTubers just going, "Oh, this really cool tool came out, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to use." But you don't really learn anything. You just sort of see them using it in a really cool way.
Right.
Great. What sets an educator aside, and this is speaking to you, and basically like what my experience has been in producing courses, is that we have to look and speak to programmers and developers and say, okay, well, what does this actually do?
Right.
What's the workflow that you're going for here?
Right.
Right. So that we can then dumb that down or simplify that and just go, right, so when we're going to teach this to someone, we want to say, Okay, you don't have to look at the Python code.
Right.
You have a brush,
Right.
and this is what the brush can do. And if you want the brush to do something else, well, this is where you look. So we have learned the hard stuff so that we can tell someone what they need to know, right?
Well, if you think about it, I mean, this goes back to how do you delete a file on almost any operating system? There's a trash can. Is it a literal trash can? Are you throwing stuff out like the way you throw out paper? No, it's not. I mean, if you want to get all technical, the way data's deleted in a computer is a whole mess. But 99% of people using the computer don't need to know that. They just need to know drag, that deletes it, whatever delete means,
Yeah,
usually it means it's gone and you free up the memory. That's all they need to know.
yeah,
My 80-year-old mom doesn't need to know how computers store data. It's
yeah,
really, if she wants to learn, great, but it doesn't matter. She's not
yeah,
programming anything, but
yeah.
she does need to delete files. So it's like if you can reference it in a way that makes sense to those people, like, a brush or, a lot of artists, they don't know they're not going to program anything, but they get a brush or they get a
Yeah,
pencil or,
yeah,
or something along those lines. So it's like,
yeah.
you're meeting them where they are, and going back to even Photoshop, why did they
That's
use the
exactly
little
right.
tools that go
Yeah.
back to dark rooms, right? Like that's where all that comes from. So,
Hmm.
oops.
No, no, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, sorry. It sounded like you got cut out for a second.
Oh, no, no, that's cool.
So, are you involved with the sort of the production of the grease pencil, or are you just kind of are you?
No, no, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I'm in like I said about the community thing. I actually do talk to a lot of the people who are involved.
Uh-huh.
So the guy who sort of started it up, well, who's credited as the person who's been the biggest promoter of it, his name is Daniel Martinez Lara,
Uh-huh.
and he saw me using it at one of the conferences, and he just comes over, and I'll talk to him a lot.
Uh-huh.
And there's a team working on developing that tool at the moment.
Oh, nice.
So I will jump onto the developer chats sometimes, but yeah, I do feel that disconnect between how developers talk and how users talk because I'll jump on. I'm like, okay, the only thing I can do is
Right.
report a bug in GitHub.
Right.
So I'll do that, and then a developer will jump on and say, "Well, no, no, that's not a bug report. That's just a question." And I'm like, "Okay, sorry, that's my bad. Where do I ask the question?" And they're like, "This is for bug reporting only." I'm like,
Yeah. No, I get it.
"Okay, I don't think you're hearing me." So, um, but yeah, so I will talk to people who are developing it. We do discuss why a tool is being developed or
Sure.
where it's going, and so I do like having that knowledge
Sure. Yeah.
because it does affect how I work. One of the biggest disconnects is that Grease Pencil isn't like Photoshop or like Inkscape,
Right.
but it is like Adobe Illustrator
Sure.
or the vector tools in Inkscape
Right.
because it's basically drawing with curves.
Sure.
And so I like to tell students that because then it sort of gives them a different perspective on how they approach it or what
Sure.
they see as possible. But yeah, to your point, yes, I do. I do talk to people involved in the development. We don't go and get a beer together or anything like that. But like, there is open communication. Yeah,
Oh, great. Before we started the interview, we kind of talked about whether we should talk about AI. How do you feel about AI and its integration with software like Blender or 3D graphics?
yeah. That's a thorny issue because look, as much as I like it or not, and it's not, um, AI's here
Sure.
and it's touching everything. It's becoming a better search engine. Search engines are going to become a thing of the past, and we're going to be what I'm seeing right now. If you're talking about the broader scope, instead of googling something, you're asking ChatGPT,
Right.
right?
Yeah, I agree with you.
And then ChatGPT does the Google for you. When it comes to graphics, AI is touching graphics again as well, but from the point of view of we're seeing a lot of people just prompting,
Sure.
right? They're saying, make me a TV commercial to sell beer.
Sure.
And then ChatGPT will go into whatever large language models it has available, take your prompt, and create what you asked for.
Sure.
What I don't like about that is that it's saying that AI will do the job for you, right? It basically is making what you're learning obsolete from that perspective. Where AI is going to be here to stay is more as in assistant roles, right?
Right.
Ultimately, what you want to do as an animator, as an illustrator, as an effects person, as a video editor, as anyone entering a creative field, is you want to get the idea in your head into the other person's head, right?
Right.
And so that is where the creative process lies. That is your job. If you get AI to do that, then what you're doing is you're asking AI to get an idea into someone else's head. You're not doing that work.
Right.
But AI can do other things, such as I've seen it being used on smaller, more assistant type of levels. So let's say, example is you have a project, you have to come up with characters, a story, a pitch, whatever, and there's a lot of moving parts to a production. Part of that is bullet points for the pitch or a range of textures that you might want to look at for a particular kind of purpose. This is time consuming work,
Sure.
right? Or even small little things that quirks in a software like Blender, which is written in Python. Where I'm seeing AI what it interests me in is using an AI bot, something more like Comfy UI. That's one,
Sure.
where you actually have to build the AI to do what you want it to do. So you're actually learning how to program an AI. That's an
Right.
interesting field. But also then getting it to do a specific task. So let's say it's going to take you a week to produce a document.
Okay.
Instead of asking ChatGPT, produce that document for me, you go, okay, I'm going to program my AI to help me with the bullet points so I can talk it
Sure.
through with the AI and brainstorm stuff. And then I can take
Yeah,
some of the stuff
it's an
that it's returned.
ideation. I don't want to say tool, but like, you use it to sort of get you started with ideas.
You're saying it better
Or
than I am. Yes, that's
yeah,
exactly right.
or
You get it to get it started, and then you go run with it, and you say, well, I am going to produce that document. You
I've
are then going
actually
to produce
used
that
it as a way
animation.
to sort of check my own teaching, where I was like, am I teaching, and granted, I take everything with AI with a grain of salt, but I
Yeah,
know they're referencing other documents, and I go,
yeah,
how would you teach an intro level Blender course? And I just see the topics and I go, oh, okay, I see the
yeah,
order, because just to sort of see what they say. I don't take it as gospel, but it's kind
yeah.
of like, okay, yeah, I could see what you're doing. I don't know if I would do it that way, but it's interesting to see. And then I'll be like, oh, I hadn't thought about teaching that skill yet. Maybe I should
Exactly.
consider,
And so with that
that.
point in mind, right? What you've gone and done is you've basically asked for a starting point, right?
Right.
But ultimately, the course that you create, you've had agency in that, and
Sure.
you're producing the work to show the student. You know, ChatGPT hasn't shown the work to the student. You
Right.
have.
Of course. Yeah.
But you've gone ahead and said, what is out there that I can teach, for instance?
Sure.
And that's where the AI is basically doing the Googling for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, this comes up more in programming because I teach
Oh,
programming,
okay.
but I joke and I go like, as someone who's been programming forever, it's like there were always places online to find snippets of code. I mean, that's nothing
Yes.
new.
Yeah.
Going back 20 years when I was I teach HTML, CSS, and JavaScript a lot. It's like you could find like this is how you build a quick to-do app in JavaScript and like literally copy the code and paste it in your editor.
Yeah.
That's always existed. I mean,
Mm.
it's AI just makes it literally faster to do
Yes.
it, but it's
Yeah.
not like that has. But what I always tell my students is this: I go, listen, because I usually teach intro level courses. If I was teaching like expert level, I would be honest and be like, I don't care if you code it or if AI codes it, as long as
Mm.
it works. Because at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. The
Yeah.
reason why I don't allow AI on entry level courses, and this is my own thing, is I don't mind AI, but you have to understand how it works before you can get help writing it. And the
That's
way I
right.
kind of explain it to people is when I was growing up in the 80s, it's not like calculators didn't exist. They existed. But I still had to learn how to do basic arithmetic by hand. And I
Yes,
know how to do math. If I use a calculator because I used to be an accountant, because everyone uses a calculator to do
exactly right. Yeah.
large amounts of, math. But I could, in theory, do it by hand if I had to. And if I make a mistake in my calculator, I don't just not understand it. Like if I put 1 plus 1 into my calculator and I get, 1,000, I don't just accept it as gospel because I understand how math works. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of how I teach it with programming. It's like once you understand the concepts,
Yep.
whether you write it or AI writes it, I don't particularly care,
Yeah,
but if you don't understand how the concepts work, well, then all you really did was learn how to copy and paste. And
that's correct.
that's a
That,
different thing.
I really like that calculator analogy. That's a really good one because it nails down that idea that you have to have some knowledge
Yes.
before you use that extra tool.
Right.
You know,
And like,
there's
and like I said, like I don't if I was high level, it's like, I go on forums all the time and I'm not a professional programmer, but I know a lot of programmers say a lot they use Claude all the time and they use it to quickly write. And of course, they know what to look for to make sure it's not
yeah,
wrong. Or if
yeah.
there's a problem, they're like, wait, that doesn't seem right. Because of course there will be problems. It's not infallible or
That's
anything like that.
correct. Yeah,
But
but like the way I put it is, you want to create an illustration or you want to create an animation. Okay, maybe you can get AI to refine a better brush,
sure.
but ultimately the brush is in your hand, so that you
Right.
can tell your story.
Right.
You know, that's where I sort of see it sitting as it's a tool that is here, but if you treat that as, oh well, AI will do everything for me, what you're going to end up with is really soulless slop,
Right.
right? Um, can I talk one more point about AI before we
Yeah, go
go
for
on
it.
to the next topic? Okay, so I saw an example where someone was really crowing about this 30-second clip they made with just by prompting it. Um, and I was looking at the animation and I said, okay, the individual components of this are quite beautiful, but that's because they've come from other sources, right?
Right.
Um, Go back 5 years, 10 years, and we were looking at things like lip sync,
Sure.
right? And animating lip sync was getting to the point where animators were going really granular. Okay, yeah, it's not enough to just to mouth the phonemes. Animators were putting in things like, biting lips or how teeth interact with
Right.
skin or how cheeks wobble. And all of those things that they were putting in told a better story,
Sure.
right? So you put that in front of the producer, and the producer comes back and go, I need a little of this tweaked, right? Now I'm seeing this 30-second AI slop, and it's like, okay, this anime girl falling into bed, and her hair is flowing like it's underwater, and I'm like, okay, how is this acceptable? When we, a few years ago, we would criticize that and say, well, that's not how hair works on a pillow. But
Right.
everyone's like, oh, look what AI can do. And everyone's sort of like dazzled by the pretty lights and moving pictures. And I'm like, well, why aren't we using the scrutiny there of like, well, why can't you make that better to tell a better story? You know what I'm saying?
The way I kind of explain it is if you go back in game design, when you have more limitations, you have to come up with better. So, like all the 80s games like Pac-Man and Missile Commander, they're obviously very simple graphics, right? They're like squares and circles and whatnot. But they're still fun to play. Like I'll still play Pac-Man and it's still a fun game, despite the fact it's, visually, weak or whatever you want to call it, because it had to be. If it wasn't fun, then why would with these horrible graphics, like, and then I'm of the age where like I was in the mid 90s, there were all these like games that were trying to take advantage of what CDs could do and have all these flashy graphics, but a lot of them sucked. And like you never hear about these games because yeah, maybe at the time they had really cool graphics. By 2026 standards, they would be very weak, but like, at the time it was like very revolutionary. But they didn't get to the core of why it was interesting. Like, yes,
Yeah.
pretty things are fun to look at, but you need more. And so like with AI, it's like I think we're kind of in this like, okay, things are cool, like it's cool that you can do this, but and this is more from like a literature standpoint. I've noticed that no AI written book has, and except maybe if there was like one people bought out of morbid curiosity, has ever topped the New York Times bestseller list that I'm aware of. And that says
Yeah,
to me, and that would be very easy to do. I mean, nothing's easier than writing a bunch of text with AI. And that says to me that it's like, yeah, it can do it, but it becomes like this uncanny valley where it's like, it looks like something that should work, but when you really read it, you can kind of be like, I don't know what this is, but it's not a
yeah,
human. Like your
yeah,
brain is like, this is not how people really do things. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And it's a little bit unsettling. And I think even with graphics, it's like, I've seen enough AI graphics where it becomes like this genre. Like even if it's like, even if you made it with Blender or you did it by hand, I'd be like, yeah, but you made it look like something that I can't even describe it. It has like this morning glow effect of like,
Yeah,
but it looks like AI did it. Even if you didn't do it with AI,
yeah,
it's in that
yeah.
style. It's like how everything in the mid aughts looked like Flash. Flash was like the dominant animation program. So
Yes. Yeah.
everything had that very flat vector kind of look. We're doing that
Mm.
now, but with AI, because AI seems
Mm.
to always do their style in a particular way. I'm assuming based on the technology
Yeah,
or
I wouldn't want to design my work to look like
right.
what it's
Right.
producing.
All right. Well, as we kind of get to the end here, what do you feel like if you had to give advice to my students with software like
Yeah.
Blender or anything like that, do you have any sort of advice for them? Or
Yeah, I do. I was thinking about this quite a bit before, like from when you contacted me first. The advice, it's really difficult to see a path forward sometimes, especially in, things are moving so quickly now.
oh,
I mean, we just
right,
touched on AI, and there's a lot of talk around that, and are we even going to have jobs and whatever.
right,
But I think coming back to a lot of the stuff that we just talked about, learning the skills, even basic ones like pencil and paper drawing,
yeah,
or even frame by frame animation, how to build things in 3D, how to animate in something like Blender, are transferable skills.
yeah,
And what I like to think is that you learn those basic skills, they become transferable later on. Someone is going to employ you because you have knowledge,
right.
right? That knowledge, whether it's a program that you haven't heard of that's coming out, or you need to learn another tool, upskilling is easy, but getting those skills under you to begin with, that is the hard part. That's where the learning curve is the steepest, right? And so if you invest the time in that, this has always been the way of the world, and I don't see this part changing.
Okay,
The tools are going to evolve,
right.
but that knowledge, that base knowledge that you gain now, is going to always put you ahead.
Huh. I think that's a good place to, yeah, I agree with you. I always sort of say things change, but they stay the same.
Yeah,
We went from like, Walt Disney and Fleischer drawing to cell painting to digital, and now we're doing it with, to 2D to 3D. But it still all goes back to a fun character that we want to watch do wacky hijinks. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Whether
We
it's
want to
Bugs
hear someone's
Bunny
story.
or, Buzz Lightyear, it's
Yeah,
all kind of the same. It's
yeah,
just I say it's the same, but it changes shape. You know what I mean? If
yeah,
that makes sense. It's like it's not different, but it's just in a different form, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah.
So, all right. Well, we appreciate your time. If my students wanted to, do you have any sort of social media or website my students could go to learn more from
Well,
you?
I do have my official website. I can
Uh-huh.
send you a link to that. It's basically my name, paulcaggegi.com. And
Okay.
I'm starting to put together a portfolio of work there mainly. We were speaking of open source. I'm most active on Mastodon or anything that
Okay.
is
Yeah, yeah.
Fediverse related.
Sure.
I do have an Instagram account. I try to steer clear of Facebook. I'm not on Facebook.
Sure.
So social media, LinkedIn is where I put all my professional stuff, but mainly my website and Fediverse related stuff is probably where you can see me. But you
Okay.
can pretty much, I put all my contact stuff all over my socials. So yeah.
Okay, great.
And
Well,
yeah, look, you'll see me around the Blender community. You'll hear my name mentioned, and I do have courses still on CG Cookie
oh, great.
and stuff like that. So yeah,
All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
thank you so much for reaching out.